What if a single mother, pushed to her breaking point by a ruthless HOA president, decided to fight back in a way that would change everything? Jessica Harper was a woman forged in the fires of sacrifice, her life a delicate tapestry woven from threads of resilience, love, and unrelenting endurance. At 34, she was a single mother to her 7-year-old son, Tyler, a boy whose infectious laugh could brighten the darkest day and whose sketchbook overflowed with intricate drawings of spaceships bound for distant galaxies, each line a testament to his boundless imagination. Jessica worked 2 grueling jobs to keep their modest 2-bedroom home in Maple Oaks, a suburban enclave where every lawn was a perfect emerald square, every mailbox painted in the HOA-approved shade of taupe, and every house stood as a monument to conformity. Her days began at 4 a.m., when she slipped into her nurse's aide scrubs at St. Mary's Hospital, bathing elderly patients, changing bedpans, and offering soft words of comfort despite the ache in her bones and the weight of her exhaustion. By 6 p.m. she was at ShopRite, scanning groceries under harsh fluorescent lights, her feet throbbing, her smile a practiced mask hiding the fatigue that clung to her like a second skin. Every dollar went to Tyler's soccer cleats, his school supplies, or the mortgage that kept their sanctuary standing, a home she'd fought tooth and nail to secure. Maple Oaks was Jessica's hard-won dream, a stark contrast to the roach-infested apartment they'd escaped 7 years ago, where the walls leaked, the heat failed, and the neighbors' fights echoed through the night, keeping Tyler awake with fear. She'd chosen Maple Oaks for its quiet streets, its promise of safety, and the hope that Tyler could grow up with a backyard for his model rockets, a place to chase fireflies, and a community that felt like family. She imagined him playing freely, his laughter mingling with other children's, his dreams of becoming an astronaut nurtured by a neighborhood that cared. But Maple Oaks came with a hidden cost: the Homeowners Association, HOA. The HOA's rulebook was a 400-page tome, a labyrinth of regulations dictating everything from the hue of front doors, no aggressive reds, blues, yellows, greens, or purples, to the permissible length of grass blades, 1.5 inches, measured biweekly with a ruler provided by the HOA at a cost of $25. Jessica memorized it like a sacred text, mowing her lawn every Saturday at dawn, repainting her fence when it faded a shade too light, and investing in a $350 lattice screen to hide her trash cans, a purchase that meant skipping her own birthday dinner, cutting back on groceries, and foregoing new shoes for herself. Compliance was her shield, a way to protect her home from the HOA's wrath and ensure Tyler's safety in a world that felt increasingly precarious. That wrath belonged to Linda Morris, the HOA president, a woman whose name was whispered like a curse in Maple Oaks, a specter haunting every pristine lawn. At 49, Linda was the epitome of suburban perfection. Blonde hair swept into a flawless chignon, designer athleisure that cost more than Jessica's monthly rent, and a smile that cut like a shard of glass, sharp, cold, and unforgiving. She'd ruled the HOA for 16 years, transforming the neighborhood into her personal fiefdom, a kingdom where her word was law. To Linda, Maple Oaks was a canvas and she was the artist painting it with rigid, unrelenting order. A crooked mailbox could earn a $300 fine. A child's toy left in a driveway could trigger a certified letter demanding immediate correction, and a $250 penalty. A single weed could cost $125 for landscaping noncompliance. A late payment could incur a $500 administrative fee. Her weekly inspections were a ritual, her clipboard a scepter, her red pen a blade that drew blood in the form of fines, fear, and humiliation, each stroke a reminder of her power. Jessica had felt that blade sting more times than she could count. 5 years ago, when Tyler left his bike in the driveway overnight after a late soccer practice, Linda slapped her with a $200 fine for obstructing aesthetic harmony. When Jessica repainted her mailbox to match HOA standards, Linda claimed it was a shade too dull, and demanded a $400 redo, citing community standards. Last summer, a single dandelion in Jessica's lawn, missed during a week when Tyler had a 104-degree fever and she'd spent nights at his bedside, wiping his forehead with a cool cloth, earned a $150 landscaping violation. 3 winters ago, when a snowstorm delayed her shoveling by a day, Linda issued a $250 fine for failure to maintain walkways. 2 years ago, when Jessica planted a small rose bush in memory of her late mother, Linda fined her $300 for an unapproved planting and demanded its removal, leaving Jessica to dig it up in tears under the cover of night. Jessica paid each fine silently, her savings dwindling, her nights spent calculating how to stretch her grocery budget, sometimes skipping meals so Tyler could have seconds or a new pair of sneakers. She wasn't a fighter. She was too tired, too focused on Tyler, too afraid of losing the home she'd poured her heart into. Tyler was her world, a bright, curious boy who spent hours sketching spaceships, asking her about black holes and dreaming of touching the stars, his eyes shining with wonder. Every rule she followed, every fine she paid was for him to keep their sanctuary safe. But Linda's latest violation was a direct assault on Jessica's sense of safety, a wound that cut deeper than any fine, piercing the core of her maternal instinct. Her home had a designated emergency exit space, a narrow strip of pavement marked with red lines, meant to ensure access for fire trucks or ambulances. It was a sacred feature, etched into Jessica's mind after a fire 7 years ago had gutted the home of the Garcias, a family down the street. The fire trucks had been delayed by a blocked exit, and though the Garcias escaped, their home was reduced to ash, their children's toys melted into unrecognizable lumps, their lives upended. The story haunted Jessica, a reminder of how fragile safety could be. She checked the emergency exit daily, her heart easing when she saw it clear, a lifeline for her son in a world where danger felt ever present. But Linda had started parking her silver BMW there, its chrome rims gleaming like a taunt, its presence a mockery of the rules she enforced so brutally on others, a blatant display of her untouchable status. The first time Jessica knocked on Linda's door, her voice polite but firm, her hands trembling with suppressed anger, her heart pounding with the weight of her request. "Could you move your car? It's blocking the emergency exit." Linda laughed, her manicured hand waving dismissively, her eyes glinting with amusement, her voice dripping with condescension. "Don't be so dramatic, Jessica. It's just for a few hours. I have a meeting." The second time, Jessica left a note, carefully worded, her handwriting neat despite her shaking hands. "Please respect the emergency exit. It's for everyone's safety." Linda tore it up in front of her, smirking, her voice sharp as a whip. "Don't make a fuss, dear. You know how busy I am running this neighborhood." The third time, Jessica called the HOA office, her voice shaking with frustration, her words measured but desperate, only to be told by Linda's assistant, Karen, a pinched-faced woman with a permanent scowl, that Mrs. Morris is exempt from minor infractions due to her contributions to the community. The fourth time, Jessica emailed the HOA board, attaching photos of the BMW in the space, only to receive a curt reply from Linda herself. "Focus on your own compliance, Ms. Harper." The message was clear. Linda was untouchable, her wealth and status a shield, her power absolute. Jessica's anger grew, a slow-burning ember in her chest, a fire fed by every fine, every smirk, every violation. She swallowed it as she always did for Tyler's sake. Until she couldn't. The day everything changed was a Sunday, gray and heavy with the threat of rain, the air thick with the scent of coming storms, the kind that rattled windows, stirred restless hearts and promised change. Jessica pulled into her driveway at 7:30 p.m., her scrubs damp with sweat from a 15-hour hospital shift that included a patient's death, a staffing crisis, a supervisor's reprimand for taking an extra 5 minutes to comfort a grieving family, and a spilled coffee that stained her only clean pair of scrubs. Tyler was at soccer practice and she had 5 minutes before her ShopRite shift, 5 minutes to grab a glass of water, check Tyler's math homework, left on the kitchen table with a smiley face drawn in the corner, a small gift that warmed her heart, and change into her cashier's apron. But there it was, Linda's BMW, parked squarely in the emergency exit space, its hood glinting mockingly under the street lights, its chrome rims catching the last rays of dusk like a challenge, its presence a slap in the face. Jessica stood frozen, her keys digging into her palm, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat, her vision blurring with a mix of exhaustion, rage, and a primal need to protect her son. This wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of Linda's entitlement, her arrogance, the HOA's chokehold on Maple Oaks, a chokehold that had squeezed Jessica until she could barely breathe. She thought of Tyler, of the Garcia fire, of the fines that forced her to skip meals so he could have new sneakers, a birthday cake, or a chance to go to the planetarium. She thought of Linda's smirk, her dismissive wave, her untouchable aura that seemed to say, "I own you and you'll never fight back." She thought of the nights she'd cried in her kitchen, her hands shaking as she balanced her checkbook, her stomach empty so Tyler's could be full. Something snapped, a dam breaking inside her, a flood of anger and resolve that had been building for years. Jessica wasn't a rebel, but she was a mother, and mothers don't bend when it comes to their children's safety. That night, after Tyler was asleep, his spaceship drawings tucked under his pillow, a model rocket glowing under his bedside lamp, Jessica sat at her kitchen table, her laptop glowing in the dark, a half-empty mug of coffee at her side, its bitterness mirroring her mood. She wasn't tech-savvy, but she'd taken engineering classes in community college, dreaming of designing bridges before Tyler's arrival rerouted her life to late-night shifts, endless bills, and a constant fight to keep her head above water. She knew enough to tinker, to problem-solve, to fight back in her own quiet, calculated way. She searched online, her fingers trembling with adrenaline, her eyes burning from exhaustion and unshed tears, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and defiance. She scrolled past parking booths, warning signs and towing services, looking for something bolder, something that would send a message without breaking the law, something that would make Linda feel the weight of her own rules for once. That's when she found it. A pop-up parking barrier, a heavy-duty steel post that could be installed underground and controlled via a smartphone app. It was legal, discreet, and outrageously expensive, $2,500 more than her monthly mortgage payment, all of her emergency fund, and half of her next paycheck. But it was worth it. This wasn't just about a parking space. It was about reclaiming her dignity, her safety, her right to exist in Maple Oaks without fear of a woman who thought she owned everyone and everything, a woman who'd built her empire on the backs of her neighbor's pain. Jessica ordered the barrier, maxing out her credit card, draining her savings to $43, and taking a $1,000 cash advance with a 24% interest rate that she knew would haunt her for months. She spent 6 weekends installing it, waking at 2 a.m. to dig into the pavement with borrowed tools from Mr. Adam, a kind neighbor who'd been fined $900 for his unapproved rose bushes, which Linda called an assault on neighborhood aesthetics. She worked in silence, the cold morning air biting her hands, her breath visible in the pre-dawn chill, her muscles aching from the effort, her fingers blistered from the shovel. She told no one, not even Marie, her best friend 3 houses down, who'd been fined $700 for her son's skateboard ramp, a gift from his late father that Linda deemed an eyesore, despite its popularity with neighborhood kids. The barrier was Jessica's secret, a line in the sand, a quiet rebellion against a system that had pushed her to the edge of her endurance, a system that had taken her money, her peace, and her pride. When it was done, she tested it, watching the steel post rise with a satisfying hum, its metal gleaming in the moonlight like a silent sentinel guarding her home, its strength a mirror of her own. She downloaded the app, linked it to her phone, and waited, her heart pounding with a mix of fear, exhilaration, and a strange, unfamiliar hope that she could finally fight back. 9 days later, Linda's BMW was back. Jessica was at ShopRite, scanning a customer's frozen pizzas, her hands moving on autopilot, her mind numb from exhaustion, her body aching from a double shift, when Marie texted, "She's in your spot again. You okay?" Jessica's heart raced, her palms sweating, her stomach twisting into knots so tight she felt sick. She excused herself to the break room, her legs shaky, her breath shallow, her vision swimming as she opened the app. She stared at the activate button, her thumb hovering, doubt creeping in like a shadow, cold and heavy. This wasn't her. She wasn't destructive. She was the woman who paid her fines, who followed the rules, who kept her head down to protect Tyler from a world that seemed designed to break them. But then she saw his face in her mind, asleep in his bed, his spaceship drawings pinned to the wall, his model rocket glowing under his lamp, trusting her to keep him safe. She thought of the Garcia fire, the blocked exit, the lives nearly lost, the ashes that haunted her dreams, the fear that kept her awake at night. She thought of Linda's laugh, her smug certainty that she was untouchable, her casual cruelty that had bled Jessica dry, fine by fine, smirk by smirk. Jessica pressed the button, her thumb steady, her heart resolute. She didn't hear the crunch, but Marie's next text came like a thunderclap, shattering the quiet of the break room. "Jessica, what did you do? Linda's car is wrecked." Jessica's stomach dropped, her pulse pounding in her ears, her hands trembling so hard she nearly dropped her phone. She clocked out early, drove home, her mind racing with a mix of triumph, terror, and disbelief, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. When she pulled into her driveway, she saw it. The BMW split clean down the middle, its front half crumpled like a crushed soda can, its chrome rims bent into grotesque shapes, its hood twisted like a piece of modern art gone wrong, its engine exposed like a wound. The alarm wailed, lights flashed, and neighbors gathered, their whispers a mix of shock, fear, and barely concealed glee, their eyes wide with a mix of horror and admiration. Linda stood beside the wreckage, screaming, her perfect chignon unraveling, her designer jacket stained with motor oil, her face red with fury, her eyes wild with panic, her hands flailing as if she could will the car back together. "Who did this? I'll sue you all," she shrieked, her voice cracking under the weight of her humiliation, her power slipping through her fingers like sand. Jessica stood at the edge of the crowd, her expression blank, her phone heavy in her pocket like a loaded gun, its weight a reminder of the line she'd crossed. Inside she felt a spark, something she hadn't felt in years. Power. For the first time she wasn't invisible. She wasn't just the single mom who paid her fines and kept quiet. She was a force, a mother who'd drawn a line to protect her son, to protect her home, to reclaim her dignity. But she also knew this was only the beginning. Linda wasn't the type to let this go, and Jessica had just declared war on a woman who thrived on control, a woman whose power was built on fear, a woman who would stop at nothing to crush her. The aftermath was a hurricane tearing through Maple Oaks, a storm of accusations, whispers, and divided loyalties that threatened to tear the neighborhood apart. Linda filed a police report within hours, accusing Jessica of vandalism, malicious destruction of property, endangering the community with reckless actions, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The HOA sent a certified letter, its language dripping with legalese, threatening a $20,000 fine and legal action for unauthorized property modification, disrupting neighborhood harmony, causing emotional distress to a board member, and undermining the aesthetic integrity of Maple Oaks. The Maple Oaks Facebook group exploded, with neighbors posting photos of the mangled BMW, its wreckage a grotesque monument in Jessica's driveway, a symbol of rebellion that divided the community. Some called her a hero. Finally, someone stood up to Linda, one anonymous post read, garnering 148 likes and 62 comments, many from neighbors who'd suffered under Linda's rule. Others called her a menace. She's gonna get us all sued. What about our property values? Another commented, sparking heated debates that raged into the early hours, with some neighbors unfriending each other in the heat of argument. Tyler, sensing the tension, clung to her at night, his voice small and trembling, his eyes wide with fear. Mom, are we in trouble? Are we gonna lose our house? Jessica hugged him tightly, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her chest, a fear that felt like a living thing clawing at her insides, threatening to consume her. No, buddy. We're okay. I promise. But she wasn't sure. Her savings were gone, her credit card maxed, the cash advance accruing interest she couldn't afford, and the HOA's threats loomed like a guillotine, its blade sharpened by Linda's fury. The police came the next morning, led by Officer Daniels, a weary man with tired eyes, a notepad worn from use, and a demeanor that suggested he'd seen too many suburban disputes to care deeply about any of them. Jessica was ready. She showed him the barriers permit, obtained through a loophole in the city's zoning laws after hours of research at the public library, her fingers stained with highlighter ink, her notes meticulous. She presented the HOA's rulebook, highlighting the emergency exit regulations in bold red ink, and a folder of photos, 15 instances of Linda's BMW in the space over 7 months, each time-stamped and dated, a testament to her meticulous anger. She documented every violation, her fury fueling her foresight, her fear of losing Tyler's home driving her to build a case as solid as the barrier itself. Daniels sighed, closing his notebook with a snap, his expression softening slightly, a flicker of respect in his eyes. It's a civil matter, he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. HOA's gotta sort this out. But between you and me, she shouldn't have parked there. That's a safety violation and you've got the proof. Good for you. The case was dropped, but Linda wasn't done. At the next HOA meeting, the community center was packed, the air thick with tension, the folding chairs filled with neighbors clutching coffee cups, flyers, and whispered suspicions, their eyes darting between Jessica and Linda. Linda stood at the podium, her voice trembling with rehearsed outrage, her designer scarf tied tightly as if holding her together, her eyes blazing with righteous fury, her hands gripping the podium like a lifeline. This is an attack on our community's values, she declared, her words sharp as knives, her voice rising with theatrical indignation. Jessica Harper is a danger to Maple Oaks. Her reckless actions threaten everything we've built, our safety, our harmony, our property values. She gestured to a slideshow of her mangled BMW, the images eliciting gasps from her loyalists. Karen, the assistant with a pinched face and a clipboard of her own, her eyes narrowed with loyalty. Mr. Thompson, a retired banker who nodded at Linda's every word like a trained dog, his face smug. And Mrs. Carter, a pearl-clutching widow who saw Linda as the guardian of suburban perfection, her fingers twisting her pearls in agitation, her lips pursed in disapproval. Jessica sat in the back, her hands clenched, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat, her stomach churning with a mix of fear, defiance, and a growing sense of purpose. She noticed the room wasn't as unified as Linda thought. Marie, who'd been fined $800 for a cracked bird bath, glared at Linda, her arms crossed, her eyes fierce with anger, her jaw set. Mr. Adam, who'd paid $9,000 in landscaping violations, despite his pristine yard, shifted uncomfortably, his fingers tapping nervously on his knee, his jaw tight with suppressed rage. Even Mrs. Carter looked uneasy, her lips pursed, her pearls forgotten, her eyes darting to Jessica with a flicker of doubt. Then Marie stood, her voice cutting through the room like a blade, sharp and unyielding, her hands on her hips, her eyes boring into Linda's. "What about your car, Linda?" she asked, her tone sharp, her words measured but laced with fury. "Why do you keep parking in Jessica's emergency exit? Isn't that against the rules you're always preaching about? Or do the rules only apply to us?" The room went silent, the air heavy with anticipation, the weight of Marie's question hanging like a storm cloud ready to burst. Linda stammered, her face flushing, her hands gripping the podium so tightly her knuckles turned white, her eyes darting around the room for allies. She recovered quickly, deflecting with a lecture about maintaining standards for the greater good, but her words rang hollow, her voice cracking under the scrutiny, her confidence crumbling like a sandcastle in the tide. The seed was planted. Jessica saw it in the neighbor's eyes: doubt, curiosity, anger, a spark of rebellion. That night she couldn't sleep, her mind racing, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and possibility. She kept thinking about Linda's untouchable aura, her wealth, her real estate company, Morris Properties, which she flaunted at every HOA meeting, boasting about her investments in our community. Why was she so obsessed with control? What was she hiding? Jessica started digging. After Tyler was asleep, his spaceship drawings tucked under his pillow, his model rocket glowing under his bedside lamp, she sat at her kitchen table, her laptop glowing, a mug of cold coffee at her side, her eyes burning from exhaustion and unshed tears. She scoured HOA records, public documents, and online forums like Reddit's r/HOAbuse, Nextdoor, obscure legal blogs, and even county property records, her fingers flying across the keyboard, her heart pounding with every discovery. She found complaints from former residents: the Garcias, who'd been fined into bankruptcy over unapproved window blinds, their home sold to Morris Properties for half its value; Mrs. Lee, who'd sold her home after relentless harassment over a $12,000 landscaping fine; and the Thompsons, who'd moved after Linda threatened foreclosure over a $2,500 late fee. She discovered Morris Properties had bought 18 Maple Oaks homes at below-market prices, all from residents who'd violated HOA rules. The fines weren't just about aesthetics. They were a weapon, a calculated strategy to drive people out so Linda could profit, her real estate empire built on the ruins of her neighbors' lives, their dreams crushed under the weight of her greed. Jessica reached out to Marie, Mr. Adam, and Mrs. Lee, who'd moved to a nearby apartment but still followed the Maple Oaks drama on the neighborhood's private Facebook group, her anger undimmed by distance. They met secretly at Marie's house, a cozy bungalow with unapproved sunflowers in the yard, a quiet act of defiance against Linda's rules. Over coffee and whispered fears, they shared stories, their voices trembling with anger, shame, and a growing sense of unity that felt like a lifeline. Marie had been fined $900 for her son's skateboard ramp, a gift from his late father that held his memory, which Linda called an eyesore, despite its popularity with neighborhood kids. Mr. Adam had paid thousands to avoid foreclosure, only to learn Linda's company bought his neighbor's foreclosed home for pennies on the dollar, turning a profit within months. Mrs. Lee dropped a bombshell. Linda had offered to forgive her $12,000 in fines if she sold her home to Morris Properties at a 60% discount. It was extortion, Mrs. Lee said, her voice breaking, her hands wringing a tissue into shreds, her eyes wet with tears, her face etched with the pain of a widow forced to choose between her home and her survival. They formed an alliance, calling themselves the Maple Oaks Resistance, a name whispered with a mix of pride, fear, and determination. They met weekly in Marie's living room, their voices hushed, their resolve growing like a fire fed by years of resentment, their coffee cups stained with late-night determination, their hands shaking with the weight of their mission. They gathered evidence, bank records showing HOA funds transferred to Morris Properties through a web of shell companies, emails from Linda to board members about revenue strategies, and a leaked memo where Linda boasted about maximizing compliance income to fund community improvements. They found a smoking gun, a recorded voicemail from Linda to a board member, casually discussing pushing out the Chens, a young couple who'd resisted her fines so Morris Properties could acquire their lot at a steal. The voicemail was chilling, Linda's voice cold and calculated, her laughter a knife in Jessica's heart, a sound that echoed the cruelty of every fine, every threat, every smirk. The annual HOA election was 16 weeks away, and the Maple Oaks resistance saw it as their chance to end Linda's reign once and for all. They worked tirelessly, compiling a 700-page dossier of Linda's abuses, cross-referenced with bank records, emails, testimonies, and the damning voicemail, each page a testament to their determination. They recruited 60 neighbors, each with a story of harassment, fines for trivial infractions, threats of foreclosure, pressure to sell. They practiced their speeches in Marie's living room, their hands shaking but their voices firm, their anger a shared flame that burned brighter with every meeting, their eyes alight with the possibility of justice. They created flyers, slipped them into mailboxes under cover of night, urging neighbors to attend the election and demand transparency now. They set up a private group chat, sharing updates, encouragement, and late-night memes about Linda's BMW, their humor a shield against their fear, their unity a weapon against her power. The neighborhood buzzed with tension, a quiet revolution brewing beneath the surface of Maple Oaks' perfect lawns, the air alive with whispers of change, the scent of rebellion as potent as the coming spring. The night of the meeting, the community center was packed, the air electric with anticipation, the folding chairs overflowing with neighbors clutching coffee cups, flyers, and whispered suspicions, their eyes darting between Jessica and Linda, their hands trembling with the weight of the moment. Linda opened with her usual speech, praising Maple Oaks' pristine standards, and promising continued excellence under my leadership. Her smile was confident, her designer blazer impeccable, her voice smooth as silk, but her eyes darted nervously as if sensing the shift in the room, the tide turning against her, the ground crumbling beneath her feet. When public comments began, Jessica stood, her knees trembling, her hands clutching the dossier, its weight a symbol of their fight, its pages worn from weeks of sleepless nights, its edges frayed from countless hands passing it in secret. Her voice was soft at first, but it grew stronger, ringing clear through the room like a bell, sharp and unyielding. "This isn't about standards," she said, her words cutting through the silence, her eyes locking onto Linda's. "This is about theft. Linda Morris has used the HOA to extort us, to drive us out, to profit from our fear." She laid out the evidence page by page, the fines, the foreclosures, the real estate deals, the shell companies, the voicemail. She passed the dossier to the board, its pages projected on a screen for all to see, the numbers and words a damning tapestry of greed, each line a nail in Linda's coffin, each page a step toward justice. Marie spoke next, her voice raw with anger, recounting her $900 birdbath fine and the nights she cried over losing her son's ramp, a gift from his late father that held his memory, a loss that cut deeper than any fine. Mr. Adams shared his near foreclosure, his voice breaking as he described selling his car to pay Linda's fees, his pride shattered, his family's future hanging by a thread, his hands trembling as he spoke. Mrs. Lee, trembling but resolute, revealed Linda's extortion attempt, her words met with gasps, her eyes wet with tears, her hands clutching a photo of her late husband, her voice steady despite her pain. One by one, 35 neighbors stood, their stories a chorus of pain and defiance. The Wilsons fined $5,000 for unapproved patio furniture. The Chens pressured to sell after a $8,000 landscaping fine. The Garcias, bankrupt and gone, their home now owned by Morris Properties. The Nguyen's who'd fled after a $6,000 fencing violation they couldn't afford. The Martinezes, who'd lost their savings to a $7,000 exterior maintenance fine. The room erupted, a cacophony of shouts, gasps, and tears, the air alive with the raw energy of a community waking from a long nightmare, their voices rising like a tidal wave. Neighbors stood, their hands shaking with years of suppressed rage, their eyes burning with the fire of rebellion. Linda tried to interrupt, her face pale, her voice shrill, her composure crumbling like a house of cards, her hands gripping the podium so tightly her knuckles turned white. "This is slander. You have no proof," she screamed, her eyes wild with desperation, her voice cracking under the weight of her lies. But the dossier was undeniable, its pages a guillotine blade, the voicemail her death knell. It played, Linda's voice echoing through the room, cold and calculated. "The Chens are stubborn but we'll push them out. Their lot's worth a fortune." The room gasped, a collective intake of breath, the sound of a neighborhood realizing the depth of their betrayal, the air thick with the weight of truth. Karen, Linda's assistant, slipped out the back door, her face ashen, her clipboard abandoned on a chair, her loyalty shattered. Mr. Thompson, her loyalist, sat frozen, his head bowed, his hands clasped tightly, his loyalty crumbling like dust. Mrs. Carter, the pearl-clutching ally, stood, her voice quiet but firm, her pearls forgotten, her eyes wet with tears, her face etched with shame. "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking, her hands trembling. "I trusted Linda. I thought she was protecting us. I was wrong." The vote was swift and unanimous. The board removed Linda as president 18-0, and launched a formal investigation into her finances, appointing an independent auditor with a mandate to follow the money, to uncover every cent she'd stolen. Linda stormed out, vowing to sue, her heels clicking furiously on the hardwood floor, her perfect facade shattered, her kingdom in ruins, her power reduced to ashes. The room buzzed with a mix of relief, disbelief, and triumph. Neighbors hugged, some crying, others laughing, their voices rising in a cacophony of freedom, their hands clasped in solidarity, their eyes shining with hope. Jessica stood at the podium, her hands shaking, her heart full, tears welling in her eyes as she looked out at the faces of her neighbors. Marie's fierce grin, Mr. Adams' quiet nod, Mrs. Lee's trembling smile, the Wilsons' clasped hands, the Chen's tearful embrace. She'd done it. They'd done it. The Maple Oaks resistance had toppled a tyrant, and the neighborhood felt alive for the first time in years, its pulse beating with the promise of change, its air alive with the scent of freedom. Jessica thought it was over, but 10 weeks later, a lawyer named Sarah Nguyen knocked on her door, her briefcase bulging with documents, her eyes fierce with purpose, her voice steady with determination, her presence a beacon in the storm of Jessica's life. Sarah was representing a class action suit against corrupt HOAs across the state, and Jessica's dossier, shared by Mrs. Lee through a network of activists, had reached her like a flare in the dark, illuminating a path to justice. It was a bombshell revealing Linda's schemes as part of a nationwide network, 52 HOA presidents colluding to manipulate property markets, siphon funds, and drive out residents for profit, their actions a web of greed that stretched from Maple Oaks to cities as far as Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles, and Boston. Sarah needed Jessica's testimony to bring them down, to expose a system that had preyed on thousands of families, turning their dreams of homeownership into nightmares, their homes into battlegrounds. "You started this," Sarah said, her voice urgent, her eyes locking onto Jessica's, her words heavy with truth. "You exposed Linda. You gave us the evidence to crack this wide open. You can help us finish this not just for Maple Oaks, but for every family she's hurt, every community she's broken." Jessica hesitated, her hands trembling as she clutched a mug of tea, the steam rising in the quiet of her kitchen, the weight of Sarah's words settling like a stone in her chest, heavy and unyielding. She was exhausted, her savings gone, her credit card maxed from the barrier, legal fees, and the cash advance that was accruing interest she couldn't afford, its numbers climbing like a predator stalking her future. She'd lost weight, her nights sleepless, her days haunted by the fear of retaliation, her body worn from months of fighting a war she never wanted, her spirit battered but unbroken. She just wanted to go back to her quiet life with Tyler, to soccer games and spaceship drawings, to mornings where she wasn't fighting a system that seemed designed to crush her, to mornings where she could watch Tyler sleep without the fear of losing their home. But then she saw him in the backyard, kicking his soccer ball, his laughter echoing in the evening air, his face bright with the joy of a child who felt safe, his eyes shining with dreams of Mars and beyond. She thought of the Garcias, bankrupt and broken, their home a pile of ash, their children's toys melted into unrecognizable lumps, their lives shattered. Mrs. Lee displaced and alone, her savings drained, her husband's memory tarnished by Linda's greed. The Wilsons, the Chens, the Nguyen's, the Martinez's, the countless others Linda had crushed with her fines and threats, their dreams stolen by a woman who saw them as pawns, their homes as profits. Jessica agreed to testify, her voice quiet but resolute, her heart heavy but determined, her eyes burning with a fire that had been kindled by years of pain. The case exploded, drawing national headlines: suburban scandal, HOA corruption network exposed, one outlet blared, featuring a photo of Jessica's dossier on its front page, its pages spread across a courtroom table, its words a beacon of truth. "Single mom takes down HOA empire," read another, with a grainy photo of Jessica shielding her face from cameras, her eyes fierce with purpose, her posture unyielding. Linda was arrested, her assets frozen, her mangled BMW a footnote in a larger story of greed that captivated the nation, a story that resonated with every family who'd ever felt the weight of a system rigged against them. The investigation uncovered $40 million in laundered HOA funds, implicating presidents in 35 cities across 6 states, from California to Florida, from New York to Texas. Maple Oaks elected Marie as president, who rewrote the rules to prioritize fairness. Bikes could stay in driveways, gardens could bloom with unapproved roses, sunflowers and daisies, and trash cans could sit out without fear of a fine. The neighborhood transformed, Neighbors waving openly, their yards alive with color, their voices free from fear, their children playing in the streets, their laughter a soundtrack to a new era, a testament to a community reborn. Jessica became a reluctant hero, her story inspiring lawsuits in 12 states, toppling corrupt HOAs from coast to coast, from small towns to sprawling suburbs, from quiet cul-de-sacs to gated communities. She spoke at community meetings, her voice steady now, sharing how ordinary people could fight back against systems built to silence them, her words carrying the weight of her journey, her eyes shining with the strength of a woman who'd faced her fears and won. Reporters camped outside her house, their cameras flashing, their questions relentless, but she waved them off, her focus on Tyler. She enrolled in night classes, picking up where her engineering dreams left off, determined to build a better future for her son, to show him that dreams could survive even the hardest battles, that resilience could outlast greed. She took him to the planetarium, his eyes wide as he traced constellations, his voice bubbling with questions about Mars, black holes, and the edges of the universe, his hand warm in hers. She saved for a telescope, a small promise to his dreams, a symbol of their shared hope, its lens a window to the stars he longed to reach. One evening, as she tucked Tyler into bed, his spaceship drawings pinned to the wall, a model rocket glowing under a lamp, its red fins catching the light, he hugged her tightly, his eyes shining with pride, his small hands warm against her back, his heartbeat steady against her chest. "You're like Captain Marvel, Mom," he said, his voice full of awe, his smile brighter than the stars, his words a gift that mended her heart. "You saved us." Jessica laughed, tears streaming down her face, her heart aching with love, her chest tight with the weight of their journey, her hands trembling as she brushed his hair. "Just doing my job, buddy," she whispered, kissing his forehead, her tears falling onto his pillow, her voice soft but strong. She stayed there watching him drift to sleep, his breath steady, his dreams safe in a home she'd fought for, a home she'd defended with every ounce of her strength. The final moment came 4 years later, at a Maple Oaks block party. The first in 25 years, a celebration of a community reborn. The street was alive with string lights, music and laughter, the air warm with the scent of grilled burgers, blooming jasmine, the sweet tang of lemonade, and the earthy aroma of unapproved sunflowers swaying in Marie's yard. Neighbors danced, their feet tapping to a local band's rhythm, their hands clapping in time. Kids chased fireflies, their giggles echoing, their jars glowing with captured light. Marie's sunflowers stood tall, their golden petals a symbol of defiance, hope, and rebirth, their roots deep in the soil of a neighborhood that had found its soul. Jessica stood with Tyler, watching the joy, the freedom, the community they'd rebuilt from the ashes of Linda's tyranny, their hands clasped, their hearts full. Her emergency exit was clear, its red lines untouched by any car, a quiet symbol of her victory, a testament to her courage, a reminder of the line she'd drawn in the sand. Tyler ran off to join his friends, his soccer ball bouncing, his spaceship sketches tucked into his pocket, his laughter mingling with the music, his joy a beacon in the night. Jessica looked up at the stars, the Big Dipper shining bright, the same constellation Tyler pointed to when he talked about flying to Mars, his dreams as vast as the sky, his future as boundless as the universe. She wasn't just a single mom anymore. She was a force, a spark that had ignited a revolution, a mother who'd fought for her son, her neighbors, and herself, a woman who'd faced a tyrant and won. She'd split a car in half, but more importantly, she'd broken a system that thrived on fear, that preyed on the vulnerable, that silenced the powerless. The fight had been long, the cost high, her savings, her sleep, her peace, her health, but the victory was theirs. A home, a community, a future worth every battle, every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. As the music swelled, a soft ballad carrying on the breeze, Jessica felt a warmth in her chest, a peace she hadn't known in years, a quiet strength that had grown from the ashes of her fear. Maple Oaks was no longer a prison of rules. It was a home, alive with possibility, its streets filled with laughter, its yards blooming with unapproved flowers, its people free to be themselves. She'd reclaimed her voice, her strength, her son's dreams. She'd fought for Tyler, for Marie, for Mrs. Lee, for every neighbor who'd stood with her, their hands clasped in solidarity, their hearts united in purpose. And under those stars, with Tyler's laughter echoing in her heart, his dreams soaring like the rockets he drew, she knew they'd never be silenced again.